Good morning, everyone. There's plenty of seats up front if everyone would like to take a seat for this session. As I had said earlier, my name is Jody DeRosa, and I'm the Property Insurance Practice Leader at Cross Insurance. And we're honored to be here today on this extremely important topic on shaping climate change. As a property insurance broker, I've seen the effects of climate change in our industry. Winds are blowing stronger, it's getting hotter, floodwaters are rising, and it's really being a trickle-down effect in the insurance arena. If you're a homeowner or a business person involved in purchasing insurance, you're seeing that costs are steadily increasing, coverages are more and more difficult to obtain. Even here in the Northeast, where wind once was not really that big of a deal, it's becoming a huge deal, and it's harder and harder and harder to get insurance. So I'd like to welcome you all, and I'm looking forward to the panel today where Jackie Kucinich is speaking to Mayor Wu in regards to shaping climate policy, and hopefully what we do here in Boston can trickle to the rest of the country and the rest of the world to improve, not just for insurance, but for everything. So thank you, welcome, enjoy the session.
Hello. Well, thank you all for coming to Globe Summit, the Boston Globe's annual conference. And thank you for joining us both in person and online for a series of discussion that brings the Boston Globe's award-winning journalism beyond the page. My name is Jackie Kucinich. I'm the Washington Bureau Chief for the Boston Globe, and I am here with Mayor Michelle Wu. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Good morning.
And we're going to be talking about the women political leaders shaping climate policy. So, speaking of climate policy, something you know quite a bit about, speed matters when it comes to climate solutions. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And you've launched many pilot programs here in Boston in line with your stated goals. But 2 years in, how do you scale up some of the things that you've launched in order to meet these ambitious goals?
Yeah, it sometimes feels like at the city level, we are just climbing. We're climbing and climbing, and the wind is blowing, and we're doing our best to, while we're headed in that direction, try to change the landscape so that we can move faster in the future. But some of the timelines, which has been frustrating at the city level, some of the timelines are so far out when you talk about the usual goals for climate policy in 2050 or even 2040. At the municipal level, what we do is focus on the day-to-day. And so our goal at the City of Boston is to put the marker down that we are going to do everything possible with an all-of-government approach to climate while being very clear about how we engage our residents in not only moving as fast as we can, but moving far with everyone along with us, so we're not leaving any of our communities or residents behind. In Boston, broadly speaking, our emissions come from about 30% from transportation and a little under 30 from transportation, a little over 70 from buildings. The largest buildings, of course, generating the most of that. And we are on track to ensure that we have the mechanisms to kind of shape how those large buildings are first reporting and then adjusting and then driving down emissions. But it's going to be a multi-year, decade-long process to get to where we really need to be on that. And then in the meantime, how do we put our energy and resources at the city level to show that we can start with our most marginalized, historically marginalized communities, make a big difference there that can then show how quickly we can all move together. So we've made some big goals around taking all of our Boston Housing Authority publicly subsidized housing footprint and having that fossil fuel free by the end of the decade. We are, even just later today, launching a green retrofit program focused on owner-occupied smaller multifamily homes, those two-family homes, triple-deckers, up to 4 units, where oftentimes it is renters living alongside those people who are owning that building, but not necessarily large landlords with lots of resources, to make sure that renters and our smaller landlords can benefit from this with city help and city subsidy as well. And then wherever we can, we're trying to model that addressing the very harms and risks and destruction of climate, actually, if we do it right, can create the opportunity for jobs that close gaps where we most need to do that as well. So we're on our I believe, third cohort of our Power Corps program. It's a green jobs program focused on training up our young people and community members in green infrastructure, in environmental and green HVAC maintenance, and we'll keep adding to that portfolio that they have. But now almost 100 young people trained up to step into those jobs as we ramp up. And then on the tree side, for example, the best technology that we have is Mother Nature's own trees, but it can take 20 years for a new sapling to grow into the size that it actually is having the impact for cooling and retaining water. And so we are working with our own arborist team and have invested more in that than the city ever has, while also cultivating what's called our Tree Alliance, where community organizations, volunteers, and community members help us do this on private property in addition to what we're doing on public property. So it's a lot in the scope of everything that we're trying to do, but the big picture is we are aiming to be a fossil fuel-free city that includes everyone. And that's going to take working as fast as we can, but also ensuring that we're putting equity at the center.
What I want to zoom in on the tree program that you've launched. How is that going? How are you? Because I mean, these communities are 7 degrees hotter?
10 degrees.
10 degrees.
Yeah.
In the summer. So how is that progressing?
Yeah. So the statistic that is often cited is a measurement between Roxbury and. Or I think it was, Allison might be in the room. And Chinatown and West Roxbury? Yes. Okay. So one of our
friends are allowed, just so we're clear.
Especially when the friend is the Commissioner of Environment sitting here. Commissioner Allison Brizius, thank you for all that you do for the city of Boston. We have, Chinatown, many people might have been there and can visualize, it's a lot of sidewalk and concrete and a lot of dense buildings all together, very few trees compared to West Roxbury, where there's much more green, even lining many of the roadways. 10-degree difference measured in at the same moment in time in those neighborhoods when you see the heat island effect making the treeless areas much hotter. And so our goal, we've worked with a number of community organizations over the last few years. An organization called Speak for the Trees has helped map every empty tree pit that is there. So the lowest hanging fruit being just getting the trees back in the sidewalks where there's already the space and the infrastructure, all the way to our urban forestry plan, which the city has partnered with many, many organizations on to ensure that we're looking at our tree canopy overall and identifying where we can bring neighborhoods up to equitable coverage. And we have some decisions to make about how we proceed within that master plan. Is it about focusing on individual neighborhoods, one at a time, that need the most work so that we are really seeing the full effect of canopy taking place? Is it focusing in a more micro way on the specific heat islands in many neighborhoods? And so at least we're starting to address some of the impacts citywide more equitably. But overall, the city can't do it alone. And so our Tree Alliance is ramped up. They're led by a number of organizations, the trustees of reservations, and even folks from the Arboretum and Sierra Club, and many, many who are here represented in this room. It's modeled after what some other cities, I think Montreal has a similar model where private organizations come together and help manage the many requests that oftentimes leave a private property owner who wants a tree but doesn't want to deal with the nuisance when a branch is hanging over or roots are starting to push up the foundation. If we had more resources to help maintain those private property trees and make decisions when private property owners are thinking about new development, that is a big chunk of our tree canopy as well.
You mentioned transportation as one of the causes of emissions, and one of the ways to reduce that, of course, is public transportation. I know you're a commuter, and I've heard from lots of friends and colleagues that the T is not exactly up to par. How much of a hindrance is this to your climate goals, and what can the state do in order to make sure people can get into the city of Boston?
Yeah, it's, as I said, within the city, it's nearly a third of our emissions comes from and is exacerbated by people not feeling that they have any other reliable options except to drive in a personal vehicle. And so it is fundamental for the T to be a reliable, convenient, affordable option, as well as, we're sitting here watching lots of cyclists ride by on protected bike lanes that were installed by the city. When people feel like they have choices, even just a smaller number of folks getting out of cars and onto transit or walking or biking, that can add up very quickly to a big difference. So we, after many years of advocacy and community push, finally have a seat for the city of Boston on the MBTA's governance board. That is a big step forward in terms of our center city, one that hosts most of the footprint of the inner rail system, actually having a decision-making role, and we intend to use it very well. The direct overlap between the MBTA and state and the city's work is probably in the area of buses, because the T owns the buses, hires the drivers, but we control how street space is allocated. Are there dedicated lanes set aside? Are the traffic and transportation signals, the traffic lights, timed so that when a bus approaches, it will turn green and allow it to move faster? We are doing everything we can to focus there, because that is also where most of the equity impacts are as well. When there's delays, when there's congestion, where there's concentration of pollution from buses that are not yet electric, that's what sits most heavily on our communities and residents of color and lower income areas. So we're fighting hard to push the T to really do what they can on the electrification front and building out the infrastructure, and then we're really digging in on the idea of buses and how to make those work better for everyone.
So you've mentioned emissions, we've talked about jobs. What are the metrics that you're measuring success by, be it your programs, initiatives?
Yeah, we in fact recently launched the kind of very first beta version of a dashboard for our Green New Deal in Boston, and this had come out of a sense of frustration in some ways, that we look at that top line is how close are we to getting to be a fossil fuel free city, and are the actions that we take every day moving the needle forward in terms of that we can get there sooner, or are the actions that we took or actually didn't take that day pushing it back even more? And the reality is that when you look at what people cite as that number, the city's total emissions footprint, it's actually a 2-year lag from when the snapshot was taken, because it's a very complex extrapolation of federal highway data and a lot of other sources. And it doesn't really help us in real time understand month to month, are we doing better? Are we falling behind? Anyway, it really frustrates me as someone who likes to look at the numbers and know day to day if we're making a difference. And so we're building our own dashboard of items like what has the MBTA ridership been for the last month? How many electric vehicle chargers have been installed so that transition is possible? How do we count the number, put a number to the quantity of residents who are trained in green jobs and the jobs that have been created on that front? So we will continue to build that dashboard out, but it's meant to be much more immediate and much more accessible to residents. It can be a little bit demoralizing because some of these measures around how our buildings are outfitted or whether they've been converted and retrofitted, that will take time to ramp up. But as we go, our goal is to not only count the number of buildings we're doing, but ensure that we can do more and do it faster as we're building up the systems and building that capacity.
Is this something you're updating monthly, quarterly, or is there a cadence to it?
The goal is to keep it as, if we can arrange it on the back end, to have it at least updated monthly, and as close to in real time as possible. And if we can connect the right data sources, it will be basically, as soon as the MBTA's numbers are updated, it would feed right into ours, for example.
Okay. So last year, you announced the city would be taking steps to be included in the state's pilot program, allowing 10 communities to establish fossil fuel-free standards for construction projects. We recently learned that 9 of those spots are taken by communities that applied earlier. And now there are several different cities in competition with Now, can you talk about what the situation is with that and what Boston will do if they get beaten out by another city?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just the idea that we can pick 10 cities and feel like this is, the resources that are available. It is so frustrating to even be in the position of having to advocate either against another municipality or to try to make our case really in comparison to many other much, much smaller cities and towns who have a very different set of goals or even opportunities with a program like being able to directly regulate fossil fuel infrastructure at the municipal level. It would be incredibly impactful for any city to be able to have that ability and not just rely on state building code. We have seen a lot of advances very recently. The state, and thanks to a lot of advocacy from folks in this room and in the climate community overall, the state did put forward an updated set of building code standards that are much more focused on climate resiliency, as well as what we call the energy stretch code, the green energy, I forget what the technical name of it, but there's a kind of supercharged version that cities can opt into as well, which the city of Boston has done that. But there's still a hole between what those standards allow you to push for and require, and then the fossil fuel-free version that we are aiming for. Through city authority alone, if we are not able to participate in this statewide program, we can do as much as we can do up to, for the largest buildings. We've already passed regulation, and those buildings that tend to come to the city to seek additional permitting and licensing and development review regulations, we are able to add some additional requirements above and beyond the energy stretch code as well. But it's really what we will miss out on by not participating in this program is in the smaller buildings, the residential homes that badly need retrofits and really can add up quickly to make up the bulk of our housing stock. To be honest, this program was designed for smaller cities, and the expectation was, having set that cap, was not to have Boston participate. We kind of have elbowed our way into the conversation because we believe that for it to truly have the scale of impact it could, the center city should be there to help shape markets along with showing what's possible. But even in some of the most recent regulations that have been put forward to, the specific details that have come out as to how the state will now take the legislative language and implement it, some of those details also are much more designed for smaller cities. So we're in communication with the state to try to understand, is this something that can even really fit the city of Boston if we even had a chance to get in? But unfortunately, we are looking at and working on what the possibilities will be to basically find a workaround if we are not able to do that. And I would just implore the state, I mean, it's a choice that we are putting a cap at 10. And it's better than 0, right? Which is where we were for every year up until this point. But we're in a race against a clock to completely reshape our built environment and consumption and societal habits and energy sources, and we need every possible barrier taken down.
Mm-hmm. According to Mass CC, women make up just 31% of clean energy jobs in Massachusetts. What can city government do to encourage more women and minorities into these clean energy jobs?
Well, anyone is welcome to come to drop into our Power Core program. This has been a really important part of ensuring that, again, as we build that fossil fuel-free city, the way that we're building it creates more opportunity and closes gaps that have persisted for far too long. And so our jobs program is really intended to connect young people from the community members from historically underinvested in areas of the city, and those who are natural network builders to bring more people into the green economy. It's incredibly inspiring to sit with the participants in this program and to see that after this training period, they are all being snapped up by different universities or even other municipalities, because we're as a labor market, desperate for those who are trained and skilled. These are jobs that can't be outsourced to install solar panels or update buildings and maintain tree canopy. And so the opportunity is there, the demand is there. We need to make sure that it is our own residents and workforce who could step into these jobs.
So I have a question from the internet. Are there any plans to increase pedestrian-only streets in Boston?
I would say yes, although, okay, I'm gonna talk generally about pedestrian access. So the goal broadly for how we get to where we need to go in the climate crisis is to electrify everything, clean the sources of electricity, and then change where things are in the world so that you don't have to go as far to get to them, which the length of distance for shipping goods or food or traveling to get to your doctor or your job all translates into energy consumption. And so in those three buckets, thinking very broadly about land use and how we get to a place where we are building local communities is really, really important. And so ultimately, that vision of a 15-minute city, of each neighborhood being a walkable hub is the foundation of where we're headed. And we want people to be able to cycle to where they need to go, take the T to where they need to go as well. So pedestrian access, we are where we're already seeing a lot of pedestrian sort of usage of the street. We're working to expand sidewalks and make it safer, and so more people are able to take advantage of that. For example, in some of the plans for renovating and modernizing State Street downtown, the original Main Street of Boston. And then in areas like Downtown Crossing, where we have a very historically successful pedestrian-only area, finding ways to continue to program and ensure that it is safe and vibrant and busy, and there are stations in the right areas to restrict vehicular traffic. And then we're starting to do this more and more in the neighborhoods as well. A short stretch in Roslindale, or our open streets events where for 6 hours on a weekend day, we shut down the entire street to vehicular traffic on some of our major stretches like Dorchester Ave or Harvard Ave in Allston, or Center Street in Jamaica Plain, really to demonstrate that public space, even though we don't usually think of streets as public space, really should be an area where we can transport more people on the same amount of space and also bring these areas to life. And so pedestrian access, when done right, I think is really powerful, because it's not only an issue for sustainable transportation and access, but it's also about economic vitality and building community.
Another question from Zoom. Governor Healy instituted a no single-use plastic bottle policy with state agencies. Is that something that the city of Boston might consider?
I think we're open to every idea. We haven't talked about this one particularly yet. I think there's the reach of what we do within city government, which can be very powerful for the city of Boston as a market participant ourselves. And then there's how do we put in place the regulations that it will actually affect more people than just work for the city of Boston. If we really wanted to see this change, how would we think about instituting it across the entire city? Many of those decisions require state legislation or intervention. Several years ago, I was part of a push to reduce the usage of single-use plastic bags. And so there's, in the city of Boston, a prohibition on single-use bags and then a fee for other types of bags, just to encourage more recycled or compostable use. And that has been a huge effort to work with all of our little bodegas and other stores and really ensure that it, again, doesn't leave people behind when we're doing that, and pushing for that kind of education. But in a perfect world, there are lots of ways in which our consumption should be reshaped, whether it is styrofoam or plastics, or even in how we think about waste management and garbage, and other cities having a little bit more proactive approach to that. So we're working through all the ways in which we can make a difference.
Well, thank you for helping me with my segue, because going outside of Boston, is there another mayor of another major city who you think is doing the transition away from fossil fuels well?
Yes, I mean, Boston is a part of a number of climate coalitions, and so we're in spaces where cities can learn from each other, whether it is the C40 group, which is much more of an international group. Recently, I just co-wrote an op-ed with the Mayor of London about fossil fuel divestment and really the progress across the Atlantic that our two cities have been making. There are cities in Latin America who are doing amazing things when it comes to food systems and public transportation. And then we learn from cities right near us as well. The Power Corps program, for example, a really intense focus on jobs and creating opportunity through the green economy, was modeled after Philadelphia's program. Montreal, we've learned a bunch from. The team has told me recently that they're eyeing Milan as another example where their food management and how to reduce food waste is really groundbreaking. So we try to pull from these best practices wherever we can. The beauty of city government is that nowhere is exactly the same, but we all have the same mindset of we just need to do things as quickly as possible, taking into account the real human impact day to day on our residents' lives.
Do you get the sense that the urgency you feel in Boston on climate change is reflected at the national level?
No, that's not, I don't, yeah. So just to be fair, I would even say that the urgency that I feel is not even reflected in our policies at the city level, right? I feel desperate and impatient every day seeing the headlines, thinking about the world that my kids are going to grow up in, and then coming up against the reality of systems that take a long time to move, right? Buildings that were built however many decades ago, which are going to take another few decades to get to where they need to be. And the scale is just, it's staggering when you think about how much we need to do and how little attention is actually focused on this. And it makes sense when you kind of connect with what people are living in their real lives, food insecurity and housing instability and just even making the household budget work at the end of the day. These all feel much more pressing. And there are issues at the city level that I get pulled into around public safety or crises that can throw my whole day schedule into flux. And instead of really sitting down and focusing on how do we plan for the 10 and 50-year time frame with climate change, we are at the point now where while we're taking action to try to change systems and get those emissions numbers down, we're having to focus also very much on the immediate of emergency management. When Boston is seeing more flooding, more sunny day flooding under blue skies just because of sea level rise without even the rain or wind from storms, that means that we have to plan for that day when we will get that big storm, and knowing which residents and which flood paths will be most impacted. Having we now have, the fire department has 2 high water vehicles that are prepared to rescue people from the situations that we see on TV and from Vermont recently or very nearby in Leominster. And so all of that has to be in place to acknowledge we are very far behind. And as we work to catch up as quickly as possible, there's a lot that has to be done even in the short term to ensure that people are safe from the impacts of climate. And so at the federal level, the frustration lies in the fact that much of what we need to do is beyond the scope of what the city's resources can address comprehensively. If we're truly talking about coastal resilience, 50% of Boston's coast is managed by the state, and so we need strong partnership and collaboration there. And the cost of doing this right, there's no way we'll be able to do it without federal resources. Even the state alone with the city cannot reach the scale of what we need to do. And so we're trying to think creatively about different climate districts, partnership with the private sector, amazing work from many of our anchor institutions like universities who are modeling how to build geothermal, new green buildings. But to do it at scale, we need the federal government to make the resources available and to lower the barriers for cities who want to get ahead to do our work, because we're often held back by the barriers from other levels of government, when Boston could be that model to show how these pieces can fit together.
Like what barriers?
I think about the 10 Communities program. There's a similar dynamic when it comes to some of the federal resources that are available. Whether, we've applied recently to up the number of electric school buses that Boston has. It's another competitive grant program, right? We don't know, and sometimes the cities that are most ahead end up getting punished for that, because it makes sense. The federal government needs to make sure that funding reaches everywhere as well. But we know we could have so much more impact, even though we're already doing a lot with our own resources, if we could unlock those programs. And so that sense of needing to pit communities against each other still for infrastructure funding to redo the Alston interchange and make that connection to sustainable transportation. We're doing our best to position ourselves, but it is still a cap that is far too low that is holding us back.
Do you feel like your generation of leaders is taking this more seriously than perhaps those before?
I would hope so. I know for sure that even the next generation coming up under us, Gen Z, for example, whenever I speak to young people on college campuses or even in the Boston public schools, climate is right at the top of the list of what they're worried about and what they're passionate about trying to change. The announcement of a climate corps is incredibly exciting news at the federal level, that there will be an outlet for everyone to get involved in that effort. But unfortunately, we are really feeling the costs now of decades of delayed action. My generation, the Millennials, we were the first for whom it's not essentially guaranteed that your life outcomes, your economic station in life will be better than your parents', right? We're the first generation where it's about a 50-50 chance if you're going to end up being more financially secure than your parents were at your same age. And as it goes down, I think there's a very strong realization from young people that our lives are on the line. Our entire future rests in, collectively, our planet getting its act together in this next very short window. And the alarm bells continue to ring with every major weather event. But I hope that in Boston, we're also demonstrating that when we do decide to take these challenges on, we in fact are solving much more than climate vulnerability. We are addressing income inequality. We are closing gaps that were formed through years of racial injustices. And we're bringing more of our residents into the opportunities that they have deserved for a long, long time and haven't had access to.
Well, we will have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Mayor Wu, for being here. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. The summit continues, so please stay tuned. And to bostonglobe.com. Thank you.
Thank you.